Hello, and welcome to this preview of the new browser authentication solution from Intersect, allowing you to secure your web channel with confidence. It's time to admit it. Passwords as a means of protecting and securing our digital assets are broken, and although we've known this for a long time, still they seem to persist. But the reality is, they're easy to guess, but difficult to remember. They're easy to crack, and they're easy to steal. So easy, in fact, that there are 15 billion compromised credentials floating around out there, a number that has grown 300% in just 2 years. These compromised credentials are the result of more than 100,000 data breaches, and 5 billion of them are completely unique, meaning that there are no repeated username-password pairs. These stolen credentials are for sale on cybercriminal marketplaces for about $70 for access to financial or banking accounts. So you need to protect your digital channels, right? As more and more services are being provided online, the web channel needs to be secured and protected from unauthorized access. Organizations therefore need to strengthen their login process, taking into consideration regulatory compliance, the latest fraud techniques, as well as the overall user experience. Enter two-factor authentication, one of the easiest and most effective techniques available to protect your users and grant them legitimate access to digital assets. Here, the password is the first factor, while the phone is the possession factor. Fortunately, 57% of businesses globally are using two-factor authentication. Unfortunately, most of this happens to be via SMS OTP. But even more unfortunate is that some organizations are still using only passwords to authenticate their users. The thing is that not all 2FA is created equally. As I've already mentioned, the most common pattern in use is the SMS OTP, sometimes combined with browser fingerprinting in order to provide a sort of endpoint identity. Both of these are, in my opinion, substandard approaches to security, but I suppose some 2FA is still better than none at all. The problem with SMS OTPs are that they provide a clumsy user experience and they are still susceptible to fraud, while browser fingerprints are also available on the dark web, just like your credentials, to be purchased and replayed. And what's more is they don't really provide a great way of identifying the browser, as they are prone to collision and drift. Then there's the sticky issue of privacy. Browser fingerprinting is considered by the browser companies as a harmful practice, as it equates to user tracking that doesn't respect user choice. These companies are actively putting in place features that will restrict their use across the web. So what can be done about this? How can we protect users and their digital assets? Well, Intersect has the answer. Our browser authentication solution provides organizations with an easy way to implement multi-factor customer authentication on the web channel in a simple and intuitive manner. Our solution provides orchestration of the entire authentication experience on behalf of the organization, with standard integration to the organization's existing identity platform, meaning there is no need to replace the system currently being used to identify users, enabling secure user experiences on the web channel with or without an app. So let's take a look at what this solution offers. First, a reminder of the old way of doing things with SMS OTPs and browser fingerprints. I've already touched on why this technique is no longer secure or appropriate, but this is roughly what it would look like. And then there's the Intersect way of doing things. First, we put down the ESP, the Intersect Secure Platform, behind the organization's firewall, which lets us issue a digital certificate to the end user's browser, whether it be on the mobile or on the desktop. This creates a strong digital endpoint identity. The certificate replaces the browser fingerprint, which as far as identity goes, is more like a rough guess, as fingerprints are prone to drift, where they change slightly over time, as well as collision, where two browser endpoints could have very similar fingerprints. Digital browser certificates, however, are unique to each browser instance and provide the organization with certainty instead of a rough guess. We then look at the user's behavioral biometrics and device and browser intelligence to assess whether they are a legitimate user or not, signals which we combine to give us an indication of the risk perceived with the transaction or login taking place. It's at this point that we decide on the next step. Either we get a green signal that there's no risk detected and the browser cert is valid, so we can just let the user in without friction. Now, this is also known as passive authentication, and it's the case about 90% of the time. We may get a red signal that there is an unacceptable amount of risk associated with this transaction, such as a fraudster trying to get in with an automated bot attack, for example, or a blacklisted merchant on an e-commerce shop that is known to keep money without sending goods, for example. Then there is the amber signal, the maybe signal, that says that a small amount of risk has been detected, but instead of cancelling the transaction, why not reach out to the customer and confirm? This is where active authentication comes in, getting explicit consent from the user and authenticating that they are legitimate. We then perform a SIM swap check to see if the number to which the OTP is going to be sent has been taken over by a fraudster, and if it passes the check, then we send the SMS OTP. But as I've already mentioned, SMS OTPs do not provide a very good user experience, which is why Intersect has another technique up its sleeve called out-of-band push USSD that provides effective and convenient authentication for the end user by simply entering 1 for accept or 9 for reject and clicking reply. I'll take you through that user experience a little bit later. We also allow for app-free authentication using FIDO roaming authenticators, such as hardware tokens, or FIDO platform authenticators, which is built into the device platform itself, such as into the laptop or the mobile device. And these techniques solve authentication for a variety of scenarios where consumers do not have a mobile app because maybe they don't own a smartphone, or they're not interested in downloading and registering another app on their phone in what has become called app fatigue. However, the gold standard of customer authentication has to be our out-of-band in-app solution for customers with your mobile app secured with our SDK. The mobile device provides a strong possession factor and can deliver a great user experience in engaging the customer while allowing for even stronger security and better authentication. Regardless of the technique used, however, it's important to note that the process of authenticating the customer is completely orchestrated on the organization's behalf, depending on the context and the most appropriate course of action in order to provide the best user experience. Unique digital certificates are issued to the browser of any and all devices the end user chooses to access your portal from, creating what we refer to as an ecosystem of trusted endpoints, allowing you to be sure that you are dealing with legitimate customers within a controlled and secure environment. Now, before I get to the actual user experience, let's take a look at some of the components of the solution. First is our digital browser certificate that replaces browser fingerprinting and cookies in order to better identify the user. Browser certificates offer the user much better privacy by allowing them to clear their cache and delete the certificate if they so wish to, whereas browser fingerprinting is persistent. You're tracked whether you like it or not. They are based on the dominant emerging pattern of asymmetric encryption, which a fingerprint is not. Each session is validated with a cryptographic handshake, which a fingerprint is not. And lastly, digital certificates allow transactions to be signed for non-repudiation purposes, something a fingerprint cannot do. What's more is, the browser certificate can also be used as a possession factor, meaning that interesting use cases begin to become possible, like true passwordless login and frictionless strong customer authentication. The next bit I want to talk about is our real-time risk assessment. Intersect is proud to say that we have partnered with NuData, a MasterCard company, to provide the behavioral biometrics and device intelligence mentioned previously that allows us to passively detect potentially fraudulent activity. We're able to detect traffic from bots and any automated or scripted activity, which lets us know if it is actually a human on the other end of the line, and then also pick up on the user's behavior to determine if it is the right human. We also gather information about the device and the browser, and we are able to detect network anomalies, device anomalies, the geolocation of the user, etc. This provides us with the ability to perform passive authentication, happening in the background. Lastly, our browser authentication policy engine provides an organization with the ability to create custom authentication flows that adjust to the user's specific context, such as the technology they have at their disposal or the action they wish to take. This lets the organization provide superior user experiences where possible, such as frictionless, passwordless login with biometrics, while on the other hand, still offering the vanilla SMS OTP experience if required, only this time more secure than similar products currently available. The following are the attestation methods that act like building blocks in the policy engine. They are, firstly, password. We still need to provide organizations a way of accepting passwords after all. Risk, an indication of how likely it is that the user is who they claim to be. The browser cert, is it new, is it familiar? When was the last time it was seen? Has it been trusted, etc.? SMS OTPs, still the dominant form factor in two-factor authentication. Push USSDs, our better, more secure, app-free, out-of-band authentication technique that doesn't require an app. And out-of-band push notifications, as already mentioned, the gold standard of multi-factor authentication. So there are two use cases that are currently supported by our solution. They are login and step up. And what's the difference? Here's an example. A user logs into the website by providing only their username and password. The risk is assessed and found to be acceptable, and they're granted access. That's the login. But they now wish to perform a sensitive transaction, such as adding a beneficiary, to transfer funds out of the account, for example, and are asked to provide more credentials. Now, this may happen silently, as in the case of passive auth, or the user may be explicitly challenged with active auth. But either way, step up is basically a request for more permissions. Okay, it's time to talk user experience. What does this solution look like? Here I have an example of a user on an internet banking site wishing to log into their account. A browser cert is issued to the top-level domain, and the risk is assessed, as previously mentioned. In this example, only a username is required. The password is not needed as a factor in this specific authentication flow. The user clicks login and is asked to check their phone. They receive a push USSD, which they respond to and are logged in securely. In my next example, I have the same user journey of logging into an account, but using the mobile app and the device biometrics to authenticate. The last thing I wish to show you is the act of trusting the browser, where a user is explicitly asked if they want to be remembered on this browser, something that I'm sure a lot of users are familiar with, but this is a remember me that actually works. The user is challenged with a push notification and a request for biometrics, and they are logged in. Once the browser has been trusted by the user, that browser certificate goes from simply being a strong identifying attribute, as a replacement for a browser fingerprint, for example, to being a possession factor for use in multi-factor authentication for subsequent sensitive transactions. This then unlocks a number of additional use cases, reducing friction and improving the user experience. Because these days, it's all about being able to offer your customers the best user experience without adding unnecessary friction. It's about striking a balance between passive authentication achieved with ongoing risk assessment and active authentication, where the user is explicitly asked to authenticate, but only when absolutely necessary. At Intersect, we call this appropriate friction, and we believe that it produces the best user experiences by keeping the end user involved without security constantly getting in the way. So that's it, our new browser authentication solution to secure the web channel with multiple factors, even for users without mobile apps. A solution where we take over the authentication experience on behalf of the organization, doing the heavy lifting to keep the criminals out while providing easy integration to existing systems. And that brings this preview to an end. I hope you found it useful and interesting. For more information, please reach out to our sales team on the virtual booth. They're waiting to hear from you. Thank you.